Professor Russell, I'd like to come to, with this breaking news coming in, of course, we have seen Iran retaliate. Of course, they've said that they have rejected and they have warned of devastation in the region. Of course, this indicates retaliation, and the deadline, clearly, it indicates that, of course, this deadline that is being set by Trump, they will not be following it. It looks like it's now an escalation. Now, earlier, we also had the UAE with the comments coming from, now this is one of the Gulf states who have now said that they have warned Iran targeting their neighbors, and they said, and I'm just quoting here, will actually concretize the American role. We have first comment coming from the UAE, who has now said that, listen, Iran, we are not going to escalate this, because now they will be taking part with international parties to open this Strait of Hormuz, and of course will retaliate.
This is the situation I think that we find ourselves in today, in which, again, the United States seems to believe that a few more bombs, a few more attacks, hitting a few more targets is somehow going to solve the political problems that it faces. And this is, I can't tell you how misguided this is. And there's no chance that bombing more targets is going to somehow make the Iranians more amenable to some kind of political solution. And as I said, I get back to this point about President Trump simply not understanding the dynamics of statecraft. I get back to, again, the situation your country found itself in with Pakistan 6, 7, 8 months ago, whenever it was, when they, very tense relations. And adults stepped in and de-escalated and tried to have a political solution. And the United States today has none of these things on the table right now with Iran, and it's very, very scary. The world, and we should also, and I don't mean to be alarmist here, but the United States and Israel are both nuclear-armed states, and Iran is not a nuclear-armed state. And this is another dimension of this conflict, which is extremely disturbing. As we continue up this escalation ladder, we get closer and closer to the prospect of nuclear weapons being used by various of the parties. And this is something that is of global significance, and we should all, as human beings and as humanity, be seeking to prevent this from happening. And we have a president in the United States right now who is not amenable to any kind of reasonable dialogue, which it's a sad day for the United States and for the international community. I don't know how else to put it.
But then now, when we look at these escalations happening, do you think, okay, let's look at what Iran has right now. Of course, most of their military targets are eliminated. And then when we look at, the ones that are left are underground. Realistically, if at all, U.S. goes and targets is this infrastructure, what does it mean for Iran? And does it actually have anything left to actually retaliate? Of course, we've seen retaliation and they are warned of it, but realistically, are they capable of defending themselves against the U.S. at this moment?
So of course, I don't know about the inventories of Iranian weapons at this stage of the game, and I'm not sure anyone really does except the Iranians. I would only say that they have responded in kind. Every time the United States has chosen to expand the list of targets, and we should be clear here that striking civilian targets in a war like this is a war crime, and there isn't any other way to say it. The United States is establishing itself firmly with its ally in Israel as a terrorist state in striking these kinds of targets. If I had to predict what was going to happen, I would say that the Iranians are going to respond in kind. And one of the characteristics, a salient characteristic of this war since it has started, is that both of the Israelis and the United States have done what? They've underestimated the Iranians, and they've underestimated Iranian capabilities. The Iranians have buried their missile facilities deep and they're firing out of concrete protected silos. I would not underestimate Iran's ability to inflict serious damage, not just on Iran and American military bases, but on the Gulf states going forward. And I think, again, the president seems to have no sort of a grasp of this fact. What would happen with the destruction of the energy infrastructure in the Gulf and the desalinization plants in the Gulf? I mean, this is a catastrophe for humanity, and this is what is awaiting us, and we do not have adults in charge in the United States. I don't think there's any question of that.
Professor Russell, as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned, it remains locked, and now there is more and more talk about the Bab al-Mandeb Strait also going into a similar lock, and that will only exacerbate, it will only increase the intensity with which the global shock is hitting countries around the world, because these are key waterways for oil to come into most parts of the eastern side, and eventually it will be affecting the western side as well, as it already is. Most countries are finding their own means of communication with Iran. Iran has in a way made it profitable for the western countries to be on talking terms with Iran and maintaining distance from the US by not getting involved in this war. Cracks have also emerged, fractures are emerging in the NATO fold, in fact, because with the statements that we're reading coming in from the White House. So there is a lot to unpack, and it keeps happening by the hour. The developments keep coming in, but as of now what we understand is Iran is firing across the Gulf nations. It is also firing towards Israel. And of course, it is maintaining its fight regardless of how many hits it has already taken. It is still in the fight. And that says so much about how they were estimated by the Americans and perhaps also the Israelis. Professor Russell, thanks so much for joining us here on the broadcast. There will be more to discuss. Look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.